Corporal Jessica Hayes sat in the medical office at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, staring at the wall and trying to keep her hands from shaking. The clock above the door read 4:30 hours. 4:30 in the morning. She'd been sitting here for 20 minutes, waiting for the on-call physician to arrive. Waiting to report what had happened. The medical assistant, a kind woman named Sergeant Paula Williams, had given her water and a blanket. Jessica wrapped it around her shoulders, though the room wasn't cold. She just felt cold inside. "He'll be here soon," Williams said gently. "Do you need anything else? I can call someone for you, a friend, chaplain." Jessica shook her head. She didn't want to see anyone, didn't want to talk to anyone. She just wanted this to be over. But she knew it was just beginning. 24 hours ago, Jessica had been a different person. A confident soldier with 5 years of service and a promising career in military intelligence. She'd been respected by her peers, trusted by her superiors, and proud of her work. 24 hours ago, she hadn't known that Captain Marcus Brennan was a predator. The doctor arrived, a Major Collins who looked tired but professional. He reviewed the medical assistant's notes, then looked at Jessica with kind eyes. "Corporal Hayes, I understand you're here to report a sexual assault." The words hung in the air. Sexual assault, so clinical, so official, so real. "Yes, sir," Jessica said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want you to know that I'm here to help you. We're going to do an examination, collect evidence if you consent, and document everything. You're in control here. We only do what you're comfortable with. Okay." Jessica nodded. She'd already made the decision to report. Walking into this medical office at 4 in the morning was the hardest thing she'd ever done, but she'd done it. Because staying silent felt worse. The examination took an hour. It was clinical and humiliating and necessary. Major Collins was professional and gentle, but Jessica felt like she was being violated all over again. Williams stayed with her the whole time, offering quiet support. Afterwards, Jessica sat in a private room while the doctor documented everything. Williams brought her fresh clothes. Jessica's uniform had been bagged as evidence. "What happens now?" Jessica asked. "Now we notify your command and the Criminal Investigation Division," Williams said. "They'll want to interview you, get your full statement." Jessica's stomach twisted. "Everyone will know." "The investigation will be kept as confidential as possible," Williams said. "But yes, some people will need to know, your command, the investigators, JAG office." And then it would spread, Jessica thought, because it always did. Everyone would know that Corporal Hayes had been assaulted. They'd whisper about it, speculate about what really happened, question whether she was telling the truth. Some would blame her. Some would say she asked for it, led him on, should have known better. Jessica had seen it happen to other women. She'd watched their careers implode after they reported. Watched them get transferred, isolated, driven out of the service. But she couldn't stay silent, not when Captain Brennan might do this to someone else. The CID investigator arrived at 6:30 hours. Special Agent Rachel Monroe was a woman in her 40s with a no-nonsense demeanor and tired eyes that suggested she'd seen too much. "Corporal Hayes, I'm Special Agent Monroe. I'm going to be handling your case. First, I want you to know that I believe you, and we're going to do everything we can to hold the person who did this accountable." Jessica felt tears spring to her eyes at those simple words. "I believe you." "Thank you," she whispered. Monroe pulled out a digital recorder. "I need to get your full statement. This is going to be difficult, but I need you to tell me everything. Start from the beginning." Jessica took a deep breath and began. She told Monroe about working late at the intelligence center yesterday evening, about how Captain Brennan had come in around 2100 hours, saying he needed help with a classified report, about how she'd stayed to assist, because that was what good soldiers did. They helped their superiors. She told Monroe about how the office had gradually emptied until it was just the two of them, how Brennan had locked the door, saying the classified material required security protocols, how she hadn't thought anything of it at first. She told Monroe about how Brennan's behavior had changed, how he'd moved closer, made comments about how she looked, how she'd tried to deflect to keep things professional to finish the work and leave. She told Monroe what happened when she tried to leave, how Brennan had blocked the door, how he'd grabbed her, how she'd said no clearly and repeatedly, how he hadn't cared. By the time Jessica finished, she was crying. Monroe handed her tissues and waited patiently. You did the right thing by reporting this immediately, Monroe said. The evidence we've collected will help the case significantly. Now I need to ask you some questions. The questions were thorough and sometimes painful. Had she been drinking? No. Had she and Brennan had any previous relationship? No. Had she ever given him any indication she was interested? Absolutely not. Were there any witnesses to anything that happened before or after? She didn't know. Where is Captain Brennan now? Jessica asked. We'll be locating him shortly. Once we do, he'll be questioned and likely restricted to base pending the investigation. Jessica nodded numbly. She was exhausted, physically and emotionally drained. She just wanted to go to sleep and wake up to find this had all been a nightmare. But she knew it wasn't. This was real. This had happened, and now she had to live with it. I'm going to walk you to your barracks, Monroe said. I'm also going to recommend that you speak with a victim advocate and consider counseling services. You don't have to go through this alone. What about work? Jessica asked. Am I supposed to just show up at the intelligence center today and pretend everything is normal? Your command will make arrangements. You may be placed on temporary leave while the investigation proceeds. As Monroe walked Jessica across the base in the early morning light, Jessica noticed soldiers starting their day. Running in formation, heading to the mess hall, going about their normal routines. Her routine would never be normal again. At her barracks, Monroe gave Jessica her card. Call me anytime, day or night. You're not alone in this, Corporal. Jessica went to her room and locked the door. She sat on her bed and stared at the wall, her mind replaying everything over and over. What could she have done differently? Should she have left earlier? Should she have been more forceful in her refusals? No, a voice in her head said firmly, "This wasn't your fault. You said no. That should have been enough." Jessica's phone buzzed. A text from her roommate, Specialist Amy Chen, who was on night shift. Heard something happened. You okay? I'm here if you need me. The word was already spreading. Jessica's hands started shaking again. Another text came in, this time from her supervisor, Master Sergeant David Torres. Hayes, report to my office at 900 hours. Jessica looked at the clock. It was 7:15 now. She had less than 2 hours before she had to face her command, face the questions, face the looks and whispers. She lay down on her bed, still in the borrowed clothes, and closed her eyes. She didn't think she could sleep, but exhaustion pulled her under. She dreamed of locked doors and hands grabbing her, and voices saying it was her fault. When her alarm went off at 8:30, Jessica felt worse than before. She showered, scrubbing her skin until it was red, trying to wash away the feeling of being touched. She put on a clean uniform, making sure everything was perfect. Armor, she thought. The uniform was armor. At 900 exactly, Jessica knocked on Master Sergeant Torres' door. Enter. Jessica walked in and stood at attention. Torres looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. At ease, Hayes, sit down. Jessica sat, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. I was briefed by CID this morning, Torres said. I want you to know that we take this allegation very seriously. Captain Brennan has been placed on administrative leave pending the investigation. Yes, Sergeant. I'm also placing you on administrative leave. It's standard procedure in these cases. You'll continue to receive pay, but you're not required to report for duty until further notice. Jessica nodded. Administrative leave, which meant sitting alone with her thoughts, no work to distract her, no normal routine. Do you have questions? Torres asked. What happens now? CID will conduct a thorough investigation. You may be asked for additional interviews. If the evidence supports it, Captain Brennan will face court-martial. And if it doesn't? Torres was quiet for a moment. Then the evidence didn't support it. But Hayes, I want you to know that making this report took courage. Whatever happens with the investigation, you did the right thing. Jessica wanted to believe him, but she'd heard stories, cases that got dropped because of lack of evidence, women whose careers were destroyed while their attackers continued serving. The military's justice system worked sometimes, but not always. Is there anything else? Torres asked. No, Sergeant. Then you're dismissed. The Victim Advocate Office will be in touch. Use the resources available. And Hayes, he looked at her seriously, I'm sorry this happened to you. Jessica left the office feeling numb, sorry this happened, as if it were random, as if it were bad luck rather than a choice someone made. She walked across the base, heading nowhere in particular. Soldiers passed her, caught up in their own lives, having no idea that Jessica's world had just shattered. Her phone buzzed again, another text from Amy. "Coming home now, I'll bring food, we'll talk if you want or just sit if you don't. Either way, you're not alone." Jessica felt tears slide down her cheeks. At least she had one friend, one person who wasn't going to abandon her. But what Jessica didn't know, what no one except a few high-ranking officials knew yet, was that her report had triggered something much bigger than a single investigation. Because Jessica wasn't the first woman to report Captain Marcus Brennan. She was the fourth, and her report was about to bring down an entire network of cover-ups, corruption, and betrayal that reached far higher than anyone imagined. The general's lockdown order was coming. And when it came, everything at Fort Campbell would change. Jessica spent the rest of the day in her room with Amy, who sat quietly beside her, asking nothing, just being present. It was exactly what Jessica needed. "You don't have to talk about it," Amy said, "but I'm here if you want to." "I reported it," Jessica said quietly. "This morning, Brennan, he assaulted me last night." Amy's face went pale, then red with anger. "That bastard, I never liked him. Something always felt off about him." "Did you ever hear anything? Rumors, complaints?" Amy hesitated. "There was talk maybe 6 months ago, something about him and a female lieutenant, but it died down quickly. I don't know what happened." Jessica's stomach sank. Others had suspected. Maybe others had been hurt, and nothing had been done. "You did the right thing reporting it," Amy said firmly. "Don't let anyone tell you different." Over the next 2 days, Jessica met with a victim advocate, a lawyer from JAG, and had 2 more interviews with Special Agent Monroe. Each time she had to relive that night. Each time it felt like being violated again. But Monroe seemed thorough and committed. "We're building a strong case," she told Jessica. "The medical evidence supports your account, and we're interviewing everyone who was on base that night." "Have you talked to Brennan?" "He's been interviewed. He's denying everything, claiming it was consensual." Jessica felt sick. Of course he was denying it. They always did. On the 3rd day after her report, Jessica was in her room when someone knocked. She opened the door to find Master Sergeant Torres standing there, his expression grave. "Hayes, I need you to come with me. There's been a development." Jessica's heart started pounding. "What kind of development?" "I can't discuss it here. Please come with me to the command center." Jessica followed Torres across the base, her mind racing. What had happened? Had they dropped the case? Had Brennan made a counter-accusation? But when they reached the command center, Jessica saw something she didn't expect. Military police were stationed at the entrance. The building was locked down. Torres showed his ID and they were allowed inside. The hallways were buzzing with activity. Officers moving quickly, voices tense, phones ringing constantly. "What's going on?" Jessica asked. "You'll see." They entered a conference room where Special Agent Monroe was waiting, along with a full-bird Colonel Jessica didn't recognize and a woman in a general's uniform. Jessica snapped to attention. "Ma'am." "At ease, Corporal Hayes, please sit down." The general gestured to a chair. "I'm Brigadier General Patricia Vance. I oversee criminal investigations for this region. I've been briefed on your case." Jessica sat, her hands trembling slightly. General Vance looked at her with serious but kind eyes. "Corporal, I want to start by thanking you for your courage in reporting what happened to you. I know how difficult that was." "Thank you, ma'am. Your report triggered an emergency investigation. You see, you're not the first woman to report Captain Brennan. You're the 4th. Jessica's breath caught. 4th. "The first report was made 18 months ago," General Vance continued. "A Lieutenant Rachel Foster. Her case was investigated by CID, but the investigation was closed due to what was termed insufficient evidence. Lieutenant Foster was transferred to another base shortly after." Monroe pulled out a file. "The second report came 10 months ago. Specialist Jennifer Walsh. Similar circumstances. Working late, Brennan assaulted her. That investigation was also closed. Walsh was medically discharged 3 months later for PTSD." Jessica felt tears building. Other women, other victims. "The third report came 4 months ago," Monroe continued. "Second Lieutenant Maria Santos. Her case was also closed quickly. She resigned her commission last month. Why wasn't he stopped? Jessica asked, her voice shaking. 3 reports and he was still free to do this to me. General Vance's expression hardened. That's what we're investigating now, because something was wrong with how those cases were handled. Very wrong. The colonel spoke up. I'm Colonel James Richardson, JAG Corps. When your report came in, Special Agent Monroe flagged it because of the pattern. She brought it to my attention, and I immediately escalated to General Vance. We started pulling files, Vance said, and we found irregularities. In all 3 previous cases, the investigations were cut short. Evidence wasn't fully processed. Witnesses weren't properly interviewed, and all 3 closures were signed off by the same person. She slid a file across the table to Jessica. Jessica opened it and saw a name, Colonel Thomas Hartley, Fort Campbell's deputy commander. We believe Colonel Hartley has been protecting Captain Brennan, General Vance said. We don't yet know why, whether it's corruption, blackmail, or something else, but we're going to find out. Jessica looked up, stunned. The deputy commander. Which is why this base is now under operational lockdown, Vance said. As of 600 this morning, no personnel are permitted to leave Fort Campbell without authorization. All command communications are being monitored. We've brought in an external investigative team. Jessica tried to process this. Her report had triggered a lockdown of an entire military base. Corporal Hayes, General Vance said gently, I need you to understand what's happening here. Your case is no longer just about what Captain Brennan did to you. It's about a systemic failure to protect soldiers. It's about corruption at the command level. And it's about making sure this never happens again. What do you need from me? Jessica asked. Your cooperation with the expanded investigation. We'll need additional interviews. And we need you to be prepared for this to become much more visible. When we arrest Colonel Hartley, when this goes to court-martial, there will be media attention. Jessica felt overwhelmed. She just wanted to report her assault. Now she was in the middle of something much bigger. I know this is a lot, Monroe said kindly. But you're not alone. We have 3 other victims who deserve justice too. Your courage in reporting is giving them a chance to get it. Over the next week, Fort Campbell was in controlled chaos. The investigation expanded rapidly. External CID agents interviewed hundreds of soldiers. Files were audited. Communications were reviewed. Jessica was interviewed 4 more times, her statement becoming part of a much larger case, and she learned more about the other victims. Lieutenant Rachel Foster had been a promising young officer, top of her class, until Brennan assaulted her. When her report went nowhere, when she saw Brennan face no consequences, she'd requested a transfer. Her career had never recovered. Specialist Jennifer Walsh had been a military intelligence analyst, like Jessica. The PTSD from her assault and the trauma of watching her case get dismissed had destroyed her mental health. She'd been medically discharged, her military career over at age 23. Second Lieutenant Maria Santos had reported her assault and then faced retaliation. She'd been given poor performance reviews, denied opportunities, isolated by her command. She'd resigned rather than continue fighting. We've contacted all 3 women, Monroe told Jessica during one of their meetings. They're willing to testify. They're willing to fight now that they know they weren't alone. Why didn't anyone connect the pattern before? Jessica asked. Because the cases were closed quickly and buried. Records weren't flagged. The reports were handled in a way that made them invisible to the larger system. Monroe's face was grim. That takes deliberate effort. Someone was making sure these cases disappeared. 10 days after Jessica's report, she was called to the command center again. This time, General Vance had news. We've arrested Colonel Hartley. He's in custody, facing charges of obstruction of justice, abuse of authority, and conduct unbecoming an officer. Did he confess? Jessica asked. He's not talking yet, but we have the evidence. Emails showing he ordered investigations closed. Records showing he falsified reports, and we have testimony from a CID agent who says Hartley pressured him to drop the Foster case. Why would he do it? Why protect Brennan? General Vance was quiet for a moment. We're still investigating that, but we have a theory. Captain Brennan is the nephew of a congressman. We believe Colonel Hartley was protecting Brennan as a favor to political connections. Jessica felt sick. Her assault and the assaults of 3 other women had been covered up because of politics. because Brennan had a powerful uncle. But it won't save him now, Vance said firmly. We have 4 victims willing to testify. We have medical evidence in your case. We have a pattern of behavior. Captain Brennan is going to face court-martial for sexual assault, multiple counts. And Hartley, he'll face court-martial too. If convicted, he'll spend years in military prison and lose his pension. His career is over. Jessica should have felt vindicated, but she just felt tired. Corporal Hayes, General Vance said, I want you to know something. This isn't how the system is supposed to work. The military is supposed to protect its soldiers, not bury their pain to protect predators. What happened to you and the others is unacceptable. But it happened anyway, Jessica said quietly. Yes, it did, and that's on us, on the leadership that failed you. All I can do now is promise that we're going to make this right. We're going to get you justice, and we're going to make changes so this doesn't happen again. Jessica wanted to believe her, but she'd heard promises before. Over the next few days, news of the arrest spread across Fort Campbell and beyond. Media outlets picked up the story. High-ranking officer arrested for covering up sexual assaults. Fort Campbell on lockdown amid abuse scandal. 4 women's courage exposes military corruption. Jessica's name was kept confidential in public reports, but on base people knew. They knew she was one of the victims. They knew her report had started this. The reactions were mixed. Some soldiers approached her with support and respect. Others avoided her, uncomfortable with the topic. A few made it clear they thought she was causing trouble, that she should have kept quiet. One afternoon in the commissary, Jessica overheard 2 male soldiers talking. This whole thing is overblown, one was saying. Probably just regret. They hooked up and then she felt bad about it. 4 different women, the other asked skeptically. Women talk, they probably coordinated their stories. Jessica felt Amy tense beside her. Say something and I swear I'll. Don't, Jessica said quietly. It's not worth it. But it hurt. Even with all the evidence, with arrests and lockdowns and investigations, some people still didn't believe them. That night, Jessica got a phone call from an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Corporal Hayes, this is Rachel Foster. Jessica's breath caught, the first victim. I wanted to call you, Rachel continued, her voice emotional, to thank you for reporting, for not staying silent like I did. You didn't stay silent, Jessica said. You reported too. But when they buried my case, I gave up. I let them transfer me. I let them win. Rachel's voice cracked. You didn't. You kept fighting even when it got bigger and scarier. Because of you, we all get another chance at justice. Jessica felt tears on her cheeks. I just did what I had to do. That's what courage is, Rachel said. Doing what you have to do even when you're terrified, even when the whole system seems designed to break you. You did that, and you gave me hope again. After the call ended, Jessica sat in the dark, thinking about Rachel's words, about the 3 other women whose lives had been shattered, about the changes that might come from this. Her assault had been a horror. The investigation had been exhausting. The lockdown had been surreal. But maybe, just maybe, something good could come from it. Maybe other women would feel safer reporting. Maybe predators would face consequences. Maybe the system would actually change. Jessica didn't know yet that the biggest revelations were still to come, that the investigation would uncover even more victims, even more cover-ups, even more corruption. She didn't know that her courage would spark a movement across the entire military, forcing a reckoning with how sexual assault was handled. She didn't know that she would stand in a courtroom and watch both Brennan and Hartley be convicted, sentenced to prison, their careers and reputations destroyed. But all of that was coming. For now, Jessica just held onto Rachel's words. You gave me hope again. And that was enough. The court-martial for Captain Marcus Brennan began 6 weeks after Jessica's report. The media attention was intense. News vans lined the streets outside Fort Campbell. Reporters requested interviews, which Jessica declined. Her JAG lawyer, Captain Andrea Walsh, advised her to let the evidence speak for itself. Your testimony will be powerful enough, Walsh told her. You don't need to justify yourself to reporters. Jessica sat in the witness waiting room with the 3 other victims. Rachel Foster had flown in from her new posting in Germany. Jennifer Walsh, the specialist who'd been medically discharged, had driven up from Nashville where she was trying to build a civilian life. Maria Santos had come from Texas, where she was working at a tech company after leaving the military. 4 women, 4 lives altered by the same predator. "Thank you all for being here," Rachel said, looking at each of them. "I know this isn't easy." "It's necessary," Maria said firmly. She was small but fierce, her eyes hard with determination. "Brennan needs to face what he did, and everyone needs to see that we're telling the truth." Jennifer was quieter, her anxiety visible. "I just want this to be over. I just want him to pay for what he took from me." Jessica understood. The military career Jennifer had loved was gone. The confidence and joy she'd once had were shattered. PTSD had stolen her peace. All because Brennan had decided his desires mattered more than their consent. Captain Walsh entered the room. "We're about to begin. Jessica, you'll be called first. Remember what we discussed. Answer questions clearly and honestly. Don't let the defense attorney rattle you. You did nothing wrong." Jessica nodded, her stomach tight with nerves. The courtroom was formal and intimidating. The military judge sat elevated at the front. The panel of officers who would decide Brennan's fate sat to the side. And there at the defense table was Brennan himself. Jessica forced herself to look at him. He wore his dress uniform, looking professional and composed, nothing like the monster who had attacked her. That was deliberate, she knew. He wanted the panel to see him as a fellow officer, not a predator. But when his eyes met hers, Jessica saw something cold there. Calculating, no remorse, no shame. Just anger that he'd been caught. The prosecutor, Major David Chen, called Jessica to the stand. She was sworn in and sat down, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Corporal Hayes," Chen began gently, "can you tell us what happened on the night of September 15th? Jessica took a deep breath and began. She told the court about working late, about Brennan coming in, about the locked door and the assault. Her voice shook, but she didn't cry. She wouldn't give Brennan that satisfaction. When she finished, Chen asked clarifying questions, establishing timeline and details. Then it was the defense attorney's turn. Captain Robert Stone was a civilian lawyer Brennan's family had hired. He approached Jessica with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Corporal Hayes, you've stated that you said no to Captain Brennan. How many times did you say it?" "Multiple times, at least 3 or 4. 3 or 4, so you're not exactly sure." "I said no clearly and repeatedly," Jessica said firmly. "But in the heat of the moment, things can be confusing, can't they? Signals can be mixed." "There was nothing confusing about me saying no." Stone changed tactics. "You worked late that night voluntarily, correct?" "Yes, to help with a classified report." "And when Captain Brennan locked the door, you didn't leave immediately." "I thought it was for security protocols. We were handling classified material." "So you trusted him?" Jessica saw the trap. If she said yes, Stone would argue she was a willing participant. If she said no, he'd ask why she stayed. "I trusted that a superior officer would behave professionally," Jessica said carefully. "That trust was betrayed." Stone pressed on, asking about her clothing, her behavior, whether she'd ever been friendly with Brennan. Each question was designed to suggest she'd somehow invited the assault. Jessica answered each one clearly and calmly, refusing to be shaken. Captain Walsh had prepared her for this. After an hour, Stone ran out of ways to attack her credibility. Jessica was dismissed from the stand, exhausted but proud of herself. She'd stood up to cross-examination. She'd told her truth. Rachel Foster testified next, describing her assault 18 months earlier. Then Jennifer Walsh, then Maria Santos. Each woman told a similar story, working late. Brennan isolating them, assault, and then reporting only to have their cases buried. The pattern was undeniable. The defense tried to argue coincidence, suggested coordination among the victims. But the prosecutor destroyed that argument by pointing out that the women hadn't known about each other until after Jessica's report triggered the investigation. "These are 4 independent reports," Major Chen told the panel. 4 women who didn't know each other reporting the same pattern of behavior. This isn't coordination. This is a serial predator. The medical evidence from Jessica's case was presented. The testimony from witnesses who'd seen the women's distress after their assaults. The expert testimony about trauma and victim behavior. And then came the devastating evidence about the cover-up. The parallel court-martial for Colonel Hartley was happening simultaneously, but key evidence from that case was presented in Brennan's trial too. Emails showing Hartley ordering investigations closed, records showing evidence that was never processed, testimony from the CID agent who'd been pressured to drop Rachel Foster's case. Colonel Hartley protected Captain Brennan repeatedly, Major Chen argued. He buried evidence, falsified reports, and denied justice to 4 women. Why would he do that unless the allegations were true, unless there was something that needed to be covered up? The defense objected, but the damage was done. The panel could see the pattern of protection, and that pattern implied guilt. On the 3rd day of the trial, Brennan took the stand in his own defense. It was a risky move, but Stone clearly hoped Brennan's military bearing and officer status would sway the panel. It backfired spectacularly. Under cross-examination, Major Chen methodically destroyed Brennan's testimony. He pointed out inconsistencies in Brennan's account. He highlighted Brennan's inability to explain why 4 different women would lie about him. He got Brennan to admit he'd been alone with each woman, in circumstances he'd deliberately created. "You have a pattern of isolating female soldiers," Chen said. "Of creating situations where you're alone with them in locked rooms. That's not coincidence, is it, Captain?" "I was just doing my job." "Your job required you to lock doors when alone with female subordinates. Sometimes for security. 4 times in 18 months, all resulting in assault allegations." Brennan's composure cracked. "They're lying, all of them. This is a conspiracy. A conspiracy involving 4 women who didn't know each other. 4 women who independently reported the same pattern of behavior. 4 women whose careers were damaged by reporting, while yours continued until Corporal Hayes was brave enough to fight back." Brennan had no good answer. His anger showed through, and the panel could see it. The mask of the professional officer slipped, revealing the predator underneath. The trial lasted 5 days. Then the panel deliberated for 6 hours. Jessica sat in the waiting room with the other women, barely breathing. This was it. Either the system would deliver justice, or it would fail them again. Rachel held Jennifer's hand. Maria paced. Jessica just stared at the wall, trying not to hope too much. When the panel returned, everyone filed back into the courtroom. Jessica's heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. The military judge addressed the panel. "Has the panel reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honors. On the charge of sexual assault of Corporal Jessica Hayes, how do you find?" "Guilty." Jessica's breath left her in a rush. Guilty, they believed her. "On the charge of sexual assault of Lieutenant Rachel Foster, how do you find?" "Guilty." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "On the charge of sexual assault of Specialist Jennifer Walsh, how do you find?" "Guilty." Jennifer sobbed openly. "On the charge of sexual assault of Second Lieutenant Maria Santos, how do you find?" "Guilty." Maria closed her eyes, a single tear sliding down her cheek. 4 counts, all guilty. The judge continued through additional charges: abuse of authority, conduct unbecoming an officer, all guilty. Brennan sat frozen at the defense table, his face white. His military career was over. His freedom was over. The sentencing phase came next. Each woman was allowed to give a victim impact statement. Rachel went first. "Captain Brennan didn't just assault me. He stole my confidence. He made me doubt myself. He made me afraid to be alone with male officers. And when the system protected him instead of me, he stole my faith in justice. Until now." Jennifer spoke about her PTSD, her medical discharge, her lost career. "I loved serving my country. That was taken from me. My mental health was shattered. I will carry the scars of what he did for the rest of my life." Maria talked about the retaliation she'd faced after reporting. "I was punished for telling the truth. I was driven out of the military I dedicated my life to, all because Captain Brennan had powerful connections." Then it was Jessica's turn. She stood and looked directly at Brennan. "You hurt me, you violated me, you tried to break me, but you failed. Because I reported what you did even when I was afraid, even when I knew people might not believe me, even when I knew it would be hard, and because I did, 3 other women got justice too." She paused, her voice strengthening. "You're not just being punished for what you did to me, You're being punished for what you did to all of us, and that punishment is because we were brave enough to tell the truth. You have no power over us anymore." Jessica sat down, her hands shaking but her head high. The panel deliberated on sentencing for another hour. When they returned, the sentence was harsh. 20 years in military prison, dishonorable discharge, forfeiture of all pay and benefits. Captain Marcus Brennan was led away in handcuffs. His career, his freedom, his future, gone. Outside the courtroom, Jessica was surrounded by the other women. They hugged each other, crying and laughing with relief and vindication. "We did it," Rachel said. "We actually did it." "Jessica did it," Maria said, looking at her. "You started this, you made them listen." "We all did it," Jessica said, "together." General Vance approached them, her expression serious but satisfied. "Ladies, I want to commend you for your courage. What you did here will have lasting impact far beyond this case." "What about Colonel Hartley?" Rachel asked. "His verdict came in an hour ago, guilty on all counts. 15 years in prison. The system failed you, but we've held those responsible accountable." It should have felt like complete victory, but Jessica knew the truth. They'd won this battle, but the war was far from over. Other women were being assaulted on military bases across the country. Other predators were being protected. Other victims were being silenced. This was just the beginning. 3 months after the trial, Jessica stood in front of a congressional committee in Washington, D.C. She wore her dress uniform, her medals polished, her posture straight. To her left sat Rachel Foster. To her right, Maria Santos. Jennifer Walsh sat at the end of the row. 4 women who had refused to stay silent. The hearing room was packed with legislators, media, and military officials. Cameras recorded every moment. This was being broadcast live on C-SPAN and covered by every major news outlet. Senator Patricia Morrison, chair of the Armed Services Committee, called the hearing to order. "We're here today to examine the military's handling of sexual assault cases, prompted by the Fort Campbell scandal. These 4 brave women exposed not just one predator, but a system that failed them repeatedly." She looked at Jessica and the others. "Corporal Hayes, Lieutenant Foster, Lieutenant Santos, Ms. Walsh, thank you for your courage in testifying today. I know this is difficult." Jessica had been nervous all morning, but now that the moment was here, she felt strangely calm. She'd faced down her attacker in court. She'd endured cross-examination. She could handle questions from politicians. Senator Morrison started with Rachel. "Lieutenant Foster, you were the first to report Captain Brennan. Tell us what happened with your case." Rachel described her assault and the investigation that followed. How the CID agent had seemed genuinely concerned at first, but then suddenly the investigation stalled. How she was told there wasn't enough evidence. How she was encouraged to move on, to let it go. "I was transferred within a month," Rachel said. "Looking back, I realized they wanted me gone, out of sight, out of mind. Easier to bury my case if I wasn't there as a constant reminder." "Did anyone tell you there had been other reports about Captain Brennan?" Morrison asked. "No, ma'am. I thought I was alone. I thought maybe I had misunderstood something, or maybe it was somehow my fault. I spent months questioning my own memory and judgment." Jennifer Walsh testified next, describing how her assault had triggered severe PTSD. "I started having panic attacks, nightmares. I couldn't focus on my work. When I sought mental health treatment, it was used against me. They said my PTSD made me unreliable. They medically discharged me instead of helping me heal." "Ms. Walsh," Senator Richard Dobson asked, "in your view, did the military prioritize protecting Captain Brennan over protecting you?" "Absolutely," Jennifer said, her voice firm despite the tears on her cheeks. "They protected his career while destroying mine." Maria Santos spoke about the retaliation she faced after reporting. Poor performance reviews she didn't deserve. Being passed over for assignments she was qualified for. Isolation from her peers. "I was punished for telling the truth," Maria said. "The message was clear, stay quiet or suffer the consequences, so I left. I resigned my commission because staying meant continuing to be victimized by a system that valued protecting an officer's reputation over protecting its soldiers." Then it was Jessica's turn. "Corporal Hayes," Senator Morrison said, "your report triggered a base-wide lockdown and exposed a massive cover-up. Walk us through your decision to report." Jessica took a deep breath. Ma'am, I won't lie and say I wasn't afraid. I knew what could happen. I'd seen other women report assault and watched their careers suffer. But I also knew that staying silent would mean Captain Brennan could hurt someone else. I couldn't live with that. When did you learn you weren't the first victim? 3 days after my report. Special Agent Monroe told me there had been 3 previous reports that were buried. Learning that was devastating. 3 women had tried to get justice, and the system had failed them. How did that make you feel? Morrison asked gently. Angry, Jessica said, and determined. If the system had worked the first time, if Rachel's case had been properly investigated, Jennifer and Maria and I would never have been hurt. The system failed us by protecting a predator. Senator Dobson leaned forward. You were placed on administrative leave during the investigation. Some have suggested this is standard procedure, but others argue it punishes the victim. What was your experience? Being placed on leave made me feel like I was the problem, Jessica said. Captain Brennan was the one who committed a crime, but I was the one who couldn't work. I understand the reasons, protecting me from retaliation, avoiding conflicts, but it felt like punishment. What would you recommend instead? Jessica had thought about this a lot. If possible, remove the accused, not the victim. Let us keep our routines, our work, our sense of normalcy. We've already lost so much. Don't take our jobs too unless we request it. The hearing continued for 3 hours. The women answered questions about the investigation, the trial, the impact on their lives and careers. They were honest about the flaws in the system, but also acknowledged the people who had helped them. Special Agent Monroe never gave up, Rachel said. She saw the pattern and refused to let it be buried again. General Vance moved quickly once she knew the truth, Maria added. She could have let bureaucracy slow things down, but she didn't. She acted. Captain Walsh, my JAG lawyer, fought for me every step of the way, Jessica said. And Master Sergeant Torres believed me when he could have dismissed my report like others had been dismissed. Senator Morrison nodded. It's important to recognize that while the system failed, there were individuals within it who did the right thing. We need more of those people in positions of authority. She shuffled her papers. This committee will be drafting legislation to reform how the military handles sexual assault cases. We'll be drawing on your testimonies and recommendations. Is there anything else you'd like to say to this committee? Jessica looked at the other women, who nodded at her to speak. Senator, we're grateful for this hearing and for the proposed reforms. But I want to be clear, changing policies isn't enough. The military needs a culture change. We need to stop questioning victims and start believing them. We need to stop protecting predators and start removing them. And we need to make it clear that sexual assault is not just a crime, it's a betrayal of everything the military stands for. She paused, gathering her thoughts. We ask our soldiers to trust each other with their lives. How can we do that if we can't trust each other not to assault us? How can we focus on our missions if we're afraid of our own comrades? Sexual assault doesn't just hurt individuals. It undermines unit cohesion, readiness, and morale. It makes us weaker as a fighting force. Jessica looked directly at the cameras. To any service member watching this who has been assaulted, you are not alone. It was not your fault, and you deserve justice. Report what happened. Fight for yourself. The system isn't perfect, but there are people who will believe you and help you. I'm proof of that. The hearing concluded with promises of reform and accountability. Jessica and the other women left the Capitol building to face a wall of reporters. Corporal Hayes, how does it feel to have sparked this national conversation? Are you satisfied with the military's response? What message do you have for other victims? Jessica stepped up to the microphones. My message to other victims is this: you are believed, you are valued, you deserve justice, and you're not alone. There are people fighting for change. We won't stop until the military is safe for everyone who serves. 6 months after the hearing, major reforms were implemented. The military justice system for sexual assault cases was overhauled. Investigations were handled by specialized units not connected to the victim's chain of command. Victims were given more support and fewer barriers to reporting. It wasn't perfect. Change in a massive institution like the military was slow and difficult, but it was progress. Jessica received orders for a new assignment. Working at the Army's Sexual Harassment Assault Response and Prevention, SHARP, office, developing training programs. It was an offer, not an order. She could decline if she wanted to return to intelligence work. She accepted. Are you sure? Amy asked when Jessica told her. You worked so hard to get into intelligence. I did, Jessica said. But this matters more. I can make a real difference here. I can help other soldiers avoid what happened to me. On her first day at the Sharp office, Jessica met her new commander, Lieutenant Colonel Rachel Foster. Jessica stopped in surprise. Rachel. Rachel smiled. Surprise. After the trial, I realized I couldn't go back to my old career. Too much had changed. So I requested a transfer to Sharp. They promoted me and gave me this command. I had no idea. We're building a good team here, Rachel said. People who have been through it, who understand what victims need. We're going to make a real difference. Over the next year, Jessica and Rachel worked together to develop new training programs. They focused on prevention, bystander intervention, and creating a culture where assault was never tolerated. They also started a peer support program, connecting assault survivors with each other. Jessica found it healing to help others navigate what she'd been through. Maria Santos joined them too, leaving her civilian tech job to return to service as a civilian Sharp specialist. I couldn't stay away, she explained. This work is too important. Jennifer Walsh wasn't ready to work in Sharp yet, but she stayed in touch. She was making progress in therapy, slowly rebuilding her life. Seeing you all fight makes me believe I can heal, she told them. 2 years after her assault, Jessica stood in front of a room full of new recruits, teaching Sharp training. She looked at their young faces, some confident, some nervous, all eager to serve. Sexual assault and harassment have no place in the military, Jessica told them. Not just because they're crimes, though they are, but because they betray everything we stand for: trust, honor, respect, courage. When we assault or harass our fellow soldiers, we destroy those values. She paused. Some of you may experience or witness these behaviors during your service. When that happens, you have a choice. You can stay silent or you can speak up. I'm here to tell you, speaking up is worth it. A female recruit raised her hand. Ma'am, what if people don't believe you? Jessica recognized the fear in the young woman's eyes. Some people won't, she said honestly, but some will, and you only need a few people who believe you to get justice. More importantly, you need to believe yourself. You need to know your truth and stand by it, regardless of what others think. After class, the young recruit approached Jessica privately. Ma'am, I was assaulted before I joined the Army. I almost didn't enlist because I was afraid it would happen again. What changed your mind? Jessica asked. I read about you, about what you did, how you reported and fought and won. It gave me hope that the military could be different, that I could serve and be safe. Jessica felt tears prick her eyes. You can be. We're working every day to make it safer, and if something does happen, you report it immediately. Come find me personally if you need to. I'll make sure you're believed and protected. Thank you, ma'am. That means everything. That evening, Jessica called her father. She'd reconciled with her family after the trial, when they'd supported her through the hardest months of her life. How was your day, sweetie? Her dad asked. Good. I talked to a recruit who joined because she heard my story. She said it gave her hope. That's wonderful. You should be proud. I am, but Dad, I've been thinking. I'm going to stay in the Army. Maybe make it a career. There's so much work to do, so many people to help. You found your calling, her father said. Your mother would be so proud of you. Jessica looked at the photo on her desk. The 4 women standing together outside the Capitol after the congressional hearing, arms around each other, smiling despite everything they'd been through. Rachel had texted the photo to their group chat with a caption, Sisters in Courage. That's what they'd become, 4 women bound together by trauma, but also by strength, by refusal to be silenced, by determination to make sure others didn't suffer as they had. The report of her assault had gone out on a September night, triggering a lockdown that changed everything. The general's order had come down instantly, because enough people in power had decided to do the right thing. And now, years later, Jessica was part of the change she'd sparked. Not just a victim who'd reported, but a warrior fighting to protect others. Her assault had tried to break her. Instead, it had forged her into someone stronger than she'd ever imagined. And she would spend the rest of her career making sure that every soldier who faced what she faced would have someone who believed them, fought for them, and helped them find justice. That was her mission now, her purpose. And she would never give up. Not ever. because courage wasn't just reporting the assault. It was fighting every day after to make sure it meant something. And Jessica Hayes would fight for the rest of her life.